If somebody had told me that the man who claimed he loved me was only waiting for me to be no more so he could inherit what my father left me, I would have sworn they were lying. But life has a way of teaching you lessons you never asked for. My name is Adaora, and I was born into wealth I never worked for. Hey, kindly support this channel by subscribing, liking our video, and hitting the bell icon. Let's go! The story of my birth has been told to me so many times that I can almost see it when I close my eyes. My mother, Nkem, was a beautiful woman, the kind that made people pause when she entered a room. She had the kind of laughter that filled every corner of a house, the kind of smile that healed wounds. But I never saw that smile with my own eyes, because the day I took my first breath, she took her last. My father, Chief Anin, was a wealthy man even then, businesses across the country, houses in Enugu, Abuja, and even Lagos. But all that meant nothing when the nurse walked out of the labor ward with tears in her eyes. He rushed to the door, expecting joy, only to be handed a crying baby and the worst news of his life. "Your wife didn't make it," people said. He screamed that night. They said he sat on the cold hospital floor with me in his arms, rocking me like his world had ended. In many ways, it had. He never forgave fate for taking her. And he never blamed me, though sometimes I wondered if he should have. Instead, he made me his world. He swore never to remarry, never to bring another woman into the home my mother once filled with her laughter. He raised me alone, pouring every drop of his love and energy into me. I grew up knowing I was loved, but also knowing I was the reason my father slept alone in a king-sized bed. Born in tears, that was me. And sometimes, when I look back, I think maybe the universe was already warning me that my story would always carry shadows, even in the brightest light. After my mother's death, people tried to convince my father to remarry. They said, "Chief, you are still young. A man like you cannot live alone." Others whispered, "Adaora needs a mother's touch. She cannot grow up without a woman in the house." But my father would only shake his head and smile sadly. "Adaora is all I need," he would say. And he meant it. I became his only treasure, the jewel he polished with all his heart. From the time I could walk, my father treated me like royalty. I never wore torn clothes. I never knew hunger. My birthday parties were the talk of the neighborhood, with clowns, bouncing castles, and enough food to feed the entire street. But it wasn't just about money. My father was present. He braided my hair with his big hands when the housemaids were too busy. He attended school open days and sat proudly in the front row, clapping the loudest whenever I recited poems or won prizes. He would lift me onto his lap and whisper, "Adaora, you are my legacy. You are my everything." He turned down women who came with smiles and promises. "No one can replace her mother," he always said. And though I sometimes wished for the softness of a woman's arms, I grew to understand that his love was more than enough. Yes, I was his daughter, but more than that, I was his reason to wake up each morning. The world saw him as Chief Anin, the wealthy businessman. But behind closed doors, he was simply Papa Adaora, the man who lived for one thing alone, me. I was his only treasure, and he guarded me like a king protects his crown. I was 17 when the world I knew crumbled like dry bread. My father, strong and full of life, was rarely ever sick. He was the kind of man who woke up at 5 a.m., exercised, read his newspapers, and still had the energy to run businesses across the country. So when he first complained of chest pains, I thought it was nothing serious. "Papa, it's probably stress," I teased. "You need to rest small." But the pains didn't stop. Within weeks, the vibrant man who carried the weight of our family began to look tired, older. He stopped going to meetings. He stayed in bed longer. Even his laughter, the sound that always filled our mansion, became scarce. I remember sitting by his bedside one night, holding his hand. His skin felt cold, and that scared me. "Papa, you will not leave me, right?" I whispered. He looked at me with sad eyes, eyes that already seemed to know what was coming. Adaora, life is a journey. Mine is almost complete. But yours is just beginning. I shook my head, tears burning my face. Don't say that. You promised never to leave me. He smiled weakly. And I'll never leave you. Even if you don't see me, I'll always be here. He touched my chest, over my heart. 2 weeks later, on a rainy Tuesday morning, my father gave his final goodbye. I held his hand as he took his last breath, but no amount of tears or prayers could keep him with me. At 17, I became an orphan, alone, with nothing but memories and a mountain of wealth I didn't know how to carry. The day of the will reading is one I can never forget. The air in the lawyer's office was thick with whispers, perfumes, and fake condolences. Uncles I had not seen in years suddenly appeared in fine agbatas, their eyes glittering with greed instead of tears. Aunties who never once called me on my birthdays were now holding my hands, pretending to comfort me. But I was not stupid. I saw the hunger in their eyes. They weren't here for me. They were here for what my father left behind. Chief Enin's lawyer, an elderly man named Barrister Okafor, cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. The room went silent. He began to read. This is the last will and testament of Chief Emeka Enin. I, being of sound mind and health at the time of writing this document, do hereby declare that all my properties, businesses, estates, and investments shall belong solely to my daughter, Adaora Enin. The room erupted. Gasps, murmurs. One of my uncles even stood up and shouted, "It's a lie! This cannot be true. What does a small girl know about managing wealth?" But Barrister Okafor remained calm. He lifted another document. Here is the signed and sealed copy witnessed by the High Court. It is authentic. Chief Enin made it clear. Everything belongs to his daughter. I sat frozen, my heart pounding. Me, 17 years old, still struggling to finish secondary school, now the owner of empires I barely understood. Some relatives glared at me with eyes full of envy. Others whispered, already plotting. And in that moment, I understood something my father once told me. Money doesn't just give you friends, Adaora. It also gives you enemies. That day, I inherited not just wealth, but a crown of fire. Wealth is heavy when you have no one to share it with. At 17, I wore a crown I didn't ask for. Everywhere I went, people called me the heiress. Girls in school whispered about me not because they admired me, but because they envied me. Boys who never noticed me before suddenly wanted to carry my books, not because they cared, but because they dreamed of sitting beside my inheritance. I lived in a mansion that echoed with silence. The cooks, the drivers, the maids, they were all there, but they weren't family. I would sit at the dining table with enough food to feed a village, yet eat alone. Sometimes, I would stare at the empty chair where my father used to sit, half expecting him to walk in and scold me for not touching my vegetables. Nights were the worst. The house was too big, the silence too loud. I would bury myself under the covers, hugging my pillow, whispering, "Papa, are you still here?" But only the hum of the generator answered. And then there were the relatives. Some came with fake smiles, pretending to care, but I could see the calculations in their eyes. To them, I wasn't Adaora. I was the golden goose. They wanted pieces of me not out of love, but out of greed. It was in those lonely years that I began to understand the curse of wealth. I had everything and nothing at the same time. I was a queen without a kingdom, a princess without a parent. A lonely crown sat on my head, and it weighed heavier with each passing day. By the time I turned 24, I had grown into a woman people admired from afar but rarely approached. Men tried, of course. Some came with flowers, others with flashy cars. But I had learned early how to spot those who loved my father's money more than me. My heart was a guarded palace, and very few were allowed in. Then, one rainy evening in Lagos, love knocked. I had gone to attend a charity gala in honor of my late father. I remember standing by the balcony, tired of the fake compliments and shallow conversations, when a deep voice said, "You look like someone who would rather be anywhere but here." I turned, and there he was, tall, handsome, with a smile that felt like sunlight after a storm. His name was Chaik. Unlike the others, he didn't talk about my father's wealth or the businesses under my name. Instead, he asked me about me, my dreams, my fears, the books I liked to read. For the first time in years, I felt seen, not as Chief Enin's daughter, but as Adaora. He made me laugh in ways I had forgotten I could. He made the emptiness in my chest feel a little lighter. And though I told myself to be careful, my heart betrayed me. 6 months later, against the warnings of relatives and friends, I stood before the altar in a white dress, smiling at the man who had swept me off my feet. I believed I had found love. What I didn't know was that sometimes love is just a mask, and behind Chaik's smile was a hunger I was yet to discover. People said I was crazy. Some whispered that I was desperate. Others said 6 months was too short to know a man. But when you're in love, time loses its meaning. 6 months felt like 6 years with Chaik. From the moment we met, he became a constant in my life. He called every morning to pray with me before I started my day. He sent flowers to my office just because. On weekends, he would drive me out of Lagos traffic to quiet places. Beaches, gardens, even small villages, where he said we could breathe without the noise of the world. Chaik had a way of making me feel like the only woman alive. He never raised his voice at me, never asked for money, never pushed me beyond my comfort. He was gentle, attentive, and his words were like honey, sweet and addicting. When he proposed on my birthday, kneeling with a diamond ring that glittered under the lights, the entire hall clapped. Tears filled my eyes as I said yes. In that moment, I believed I had finally found the family I longed for. Our wedding was grand, the kind fit for a princess. Guests filled the hall in glittering attires. Photographers flashed their cameras. And for the first time since my father's death, I felt complete. Chaik held my hands at the altar and promised me forever. I didn't know that forever could be shorter than I thought. Because while I was falling in love, he was calculating. And while I dreamed of a home filled with laughter, he dreamed of an empire that wasn't his. 6 months of love had led me to the altar, but it would take years before I discovered the truth hidden in his vows. At first, marriage felt like a dream. I would wake up beside Chaik and smile, grateful that love had finally found me. He cooked breakfast on Sundays, kissed my forehead before work, and held me close at night. To the outside world, we were the perfect couple. But perfection has a way of cracking when you look closely. It started with little things. Chaik became unusually curious about my father's companies. He would ask, "Adaora, which account does the oil business run on?" Or, "Do you know where your father kept the original property deeds?" At first, I brushed it off as innocent interest. After all, he was my husband. Wasn't he entitled to know? Then, I noticed how his tone changed whenever money came up. His eyes would brighten at the mention of profits and dividends, but dim whenever I spoke about my personal dreams, like starting a foundation in my father's name. "Charity can wait," he'd say, waving his hand. "Let's focus on growing the empire first." The most painful crack appeared during a dinner with friends. A simple joke about rich wives made Chaik snap. He laughed along, but later that night he said, "People only respect a man when he holds the wealth. A woman's money is never safe." His words stung, but he kissed me after, whispering, "Don't mind me. I was just talking nonsense." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe love was enough. But in my heart, I began to feel the shift. The way his eyes lingered more on documents than on me. The paradise I thought I had was slowly revealing itself for what it was. A beautiful cage, painted with lies. Her name was Ifeoma. We had been friends since university, the kind of friend you share secrets with, the kind you call at 2 a.m. when the world feels heavy. Ifeoma was bold, outspoken, and always quick with advice. She had been one of my bridesmaids, standing beside me on the day I said, I do. So when she started visiting often, I thought nothing of it. Marriage is new for you, she would say, smiling. You need me around. Sometimes she stayed till late at night, watching movies, laughing loudly in our living room as though she lived there. At first, I was happy. I thought her presence would help me feel less lonely, especially since Chaik had started traveling more for business. But soon, I began to notice small things. Her eyes lingered too long on my husband. She laughed too hard at his jokes, even the ones that weren't funny. Once, I walked into the kitchen and found them standing too close, whispering. They jumped apart like guilty children when they saw me. Ah, Adaora, Ifioma said, forcing a smile. I was just telling Chaik to take care of you well. You're too soft-hearted. Her words sounded harmless, but the way she said them, the way her hand brushed his arm, something in my chest tightened. And then came the whispers. She would pull me aside and say things like, a man feels respected when he's in charge, Ada. Don't hold too tightly to your father's businesses. Let Chaik handle it. That's what real wives do. I trusted Ifioma. I loved her like a sister. But each whisper she planted seemed to water a seed I didn't realize was growing. A seed of betrayal. Looking back now, I should have known that the enemy doesn't always come from outside. Sometimes it comes smiling from your own circle. It was a Saturday morning, the kind where the sun was gentle and the air smelled of fried plantain from the kitchen. I was sitting in the living room, flipping through a magazine, when Chaik walked in, dressed casually but with a serious look on his face. He sat beside me, took my hand, and kissed it softly. Adaora, you know I love you, right? I smiled, leaning into him. Of course. He hesitated, then sighed like a man carrying the weight of the world. I've been thinking about us, about our future. And honestly, I feel like you carry too much burden alone. I frowned, not understanding. What do you mean? He looked into my eyes, his voice low and tender. All these businesses, properties, documents, it's too much for one person. You're young, Adaora. You should be enjoying your life, not drowning in management. Let me help you. Transfer everything into my name. That way, people will respect us more. They'll see me as the man of the house, and you as the queen beside me. For a moment, his words sounded sweet, logical even. The way he stroked my hand, the way his eyes softened. It almost felt like he was doing it out of love. But deep down, my father's warning echoed in my ears. Money doesn't just give you friends, Adaora. It gives you enemies too. I forced a smile, hiding the chill that ran through me. You're right, my love. Maybe it's time I trust you with everything. He kissed my forehead, relieved. He had no idea I was already planning something he would never see coming. Sometimes the sweetest requests hide the deadliest traps. But I wasn't about to fall into his. When Chaik made his sweet request, he thought I would melt into blind submission. But I am my father's daughter, and my father didn't raise a fool. The very next week, I called Barrister Okafor, the family lawyer who had read my father's will. I told him everything. Chaik's sudden interest, his request to have the properties transferred, and the whispers Ifioma had been planting in my ears. The old man sighed deeply. Your father suspected this might happen one day, he said. That is why he left strict instructions that nothing should ever be changed without proper verification. I smiled through my tears. Even in death, Papa was still protecting me. So we made a plan. When Chaik asked again, I nodded sweetly. You're right, my love. I trust you. I'll sign whatever you need. His eyes lit up like a child given candy. He hugged me so tightly I almost laughed. Within a week, I presented him with documents, thick files stamped, signed, and sealed. They looked perfect, professional. To anyone else, they were authentic. To Chaik, they were gold. But only I and Barrister Okafor knew the truth. Every signature, every seal, every page was fake. When Chike flipped through the papers, his hands trembled with excitement. Adaora, you've made me the happiest man alive. I smiled, resting my head on his shoulder. Anything for you. In that moment, I learned something powerful. Sometimes the best way to fight an enemy is to let them think they've already won. And Chike? He believed the game was his. He had no idea I had just made him a king in a castle of shadows. The whispers had been in my ears for months, but I had brushed them aside, convincing myself they were lies meant to scatter my marriage. Yet, the truth has a way of revealing itself at the most unexpected moments. One evening, as I was leaving a charity event earlier than planned, I saw Chike's car parked outside a small hotel on the outskirts of town. My heart skipped, but I told myself he might be there for business. Still, something in my spirit urged me to wait. Minutes turned into an hour, and then I saw her, Ifeoma, my closest friend. She walked out of the hotel, adjusting her hair, her face glowing with the kind of smile I hadn't seen her wear around me in years. Chike followed right behind her, his hand brushing against her waist in a way no man touches a mere friend. I felt the air knock out of my chest. My worst fear stood before me. Not just that Chike had a mistress, but that the mistress was Ifeoma, the very friend who had stood in my bridal train, the same woman who had once sworn she'd protect my happiness. I didn't confront them that night. Instead, I went home, numb, my mind racing. As I lay in bed pretending to sleep, Chike returned hours later, smelling faintly of perfume that wasn't mine. He kissed my forehead absent-mindedly, as if I were already just a shadow in his life. Tears rolled down silently, but in those tears came a vow. I would not be broken. They thought they were weaving a net around me, but they had no idea I had already laid my own trap. Betrayal cuts deep, but for a clever heiress, betrayal only sharpens the blade of vengeance. It was one thing to suspect. It was another to know. But the day I caught them together with my own eyes, the world tilted beneath me. I had gone to Ifeoma's apartment, carrying a basket of fruits and a dress I had borrowed from her months before. I needed to believe my suspicions were just the wild games of my imagination. But when I opened the door, using the spare key she had once given me, what I saw froze my blood. Chike was there, sitting comfortably on her couch, his tie loosened, his hand wrapped around a glass of wine. Ifeoma emerged from the bedroom in a silk robe, her hair tousled in a way that told more truth than words ever could. They both stared at me, wide-eyed, caught in their sin. Ifeoma tried to laugh it off. Adaora, it's not what it looks like. But the way Chike avoided my gaze, the way he adjusted himself nervously, said everything. My hands trembled, but my voice was steady. It's exactly what it looks like. In that moment, the veil tore completely. The mistress was not some faceless woman from the shadows. She was my friend, my confidant, the one who had wiped my tears when I buried my father. That night, I cried harder than I had in years, but even through the tears, I made a promise to myself. I would not confront them with anger. I would not scream or curse. No, their betrayal had just given me the perfect weapon, silence. Because silence makes fools believe they are winning. And I wanted them to believe exactly that. Ifeoma had always been persuasive. She had a way of speaking softly, with just the right tilt of her head and a smile that hid poison on her tongue. And Chike, blinded by greed and lust, drank in every word she spoke as though it were gospel. It started as a whisper, a subtle suggestion when they were alone in her apartment, wrapped in the fog of their forbidden romance. "Chike, don't you see?" she murmured, tracing her fingers along his chest. "As long as Adaora is alive, you'll never be free. Everything you want is in her name. Her wealth, her houses, her empire. You are just borrowing them." Chike shifted uneasily. "But the properties are already mine." She transferred them. Ifeoma smirked, sipping her wine. "Transferred, yes, but as long as she lives, she can take them back." All it takes is one lawyer, one signature. And then what happens to us? You'll be left with nothing. Do you want that? The words gnawed at him. He tried to argue, but she pressed harder, her eyes gleaming with dark ambition. Think about it. Once she's gone, no one will question you. You're the husband. Everything will naturally be yours. We can finally live openly, travel, build our own empire. No more hiding. By the time the night ended, the seed had been planted. Chike lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling, while Ifioma curled against him with a satisfied smile. She knew she had won. What neither of them realized was that the woman they plotted against was 10 steps ahead. Their whispers of death were about to awaken a fire they could never put out. It began with a sharp pain in my stomach one evening, a twisting knot that left me breathless. First, I thought it was stress. After all, I had been carrying the weight of betrayal in silence, pretending not to know that my marriage was a house of lies. But as the days passed, the pain worsened, spreading into fever, dizziness, and weakness that left me barely able to stand. Chike, ironically, was the one who rushed me to the hospital. He held my hand in the car, his face plastered with worry, but I could see the flicker in his eyes. A glimmer too eager, too quick. Was this concern? Or was it excitement that fate might be doing his dirty work for him? The doctors admitted me immediately, running tests while I drifted in and out of consciousness. I heard fragments of conversations, nurses whispering, Chike asking too many questions about my condition, Ifioma's perfume lingering in the corridor like a curse. For 3 days, my body fought a mysterious battle. Sometimes, I wondered if I had been poisoned, though there was no proof. Other times, I thought perhaps it was just the weight of grief and heartbreak finally crushing me. But then, on the 4th morning, I woke with a strange clarity. The pain had lessened, and my mind was sharper than it had been in months. The doctor leaned close and whispered, "Madam Adaora, your strength is returning. But if you trust me, I have a way to test the hearts of those around you." It was in that sterile hospital room with machines beeping softly that the plan was born. A plan to let the world believe I was gone. A plan to finally strip the masks off those who wished me dead. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady hum of the air conditioner and the faint beep of the heart monitor beside me. The doctor, an older man with wise, cautious eyes, leaned closer as I gripped his wrist with what little strength I had left. "Doctor," I whispered, my voice trembling but steady with determination, "I need you to help me. Please, tell my husband I am dead." He blinked, startled. "Dead? Madam Adaora, you are recovering well. Why would you want such a thing?" I closed my eyes for a moment, then opened them, letting the tears flow. "Because the man who should be praying for my healing is praying for my death. I have seen it in his eyes. And worse, the woman he conspires with is my friend. I need to know what they will do when they believe I am gone. Only then will I have proof of their betrayal." The doctor studied me silently, then sighed deeply. "This is dangerous, you know. Could backfire." "I understand," I said firmly. "But I am not afraid. I have nothing left to lose if they are already planning my end." After a long pause, he nodded slowly, a reluctant ally in my dangerous gamble. "Very well. Tomorrow morning, I will pronounce you dead. But you must remain hidden, unseen, until the time is right. Only a handful of my most trusted staff will know the truth." Relief washed over me. For the first time since my world began to collapse, I felt a spark of control. They thought they were hunting me, but I was about to become the shadow they could not see coming. That night, I lay still in the hospital bed, rehearsing my silence, my stillness. By morning, Adaora, the heiress, would be gone. But from the ashes of that lie, vengeance would rise. The morning the doctor declared me gone, my hospital room turned into a theater of lies. I lay on the bed, eyes closed, body unnaturally still, every breath carefully hidden as I listened to the performance unfold. The doctor met Chaik in the corridor first. "I'm sorry, sir. We did everything we could. Your wife didn't make it." A heavy silence followed, then the sound of muffled sobs. But even in my feigned stillness, I could hear the difference between true grief and rehearsed sorrow. Chaik's voice broke. "No, not Adaora." But there was no weight behind the words. His cries were hollow, a parody of pain. Minutes later, Ifeoma entered. She wailed loudly, clutching at Chaik's shoulder. "Oh, my friend! Why so soon?" Her words cracked like glass, sharp and fake. I wanted to open my eyes and scream, "Liar!" But I remained perfectly still. The doctor left us, and the silence that followed cut through the room like a knife. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, their sobs dissolved into laughter. Chaik's voice dropped low. "Finally, she's gone. Everything is ours now." Ifeoma's giggle followed, light and wicked. "We don't have to hide anymore. No more sneaking, no more pretending. It's our time." Their words poured into my ears like poison, but I endured it, my heart beating against my ribs. They thought I was dead, yet every vile word they spoke was stitching my resolve tighter. When they finally left, hand in hand, still chuckling through their mock tears, I opened my eyes. My soul burned with a cold fire. They believed they had won, but they had only dug their graves deeper. The moment they left the hospital, their act of grief dissolved completely. Neighbors who had seen them arrive with red eyes and trembling voices would never have guessed the truth, that by the time they entered Ifeoma's apartment, their sorrow had turned into champagne and laughter. Chaik popped open a bottle of wine with a grin so wide it disgusted me to imagine it. "To freedom!" he toasted, raising his glass. Ifeoma clinked hers against his, her laughter echoing in the room. "And to wealth. Can you believe it, Chaik? We don't have to sneak around anymore. Everything she had now belongs to us." They poured themselves into each other's arms, intoxicated by greed, their whispers dripping with lust and wicked promises. Chaik paced the room, giddy, already plotting. "Tomorrow I'll move you into the house. No more apartments, no more hiding. That mansion will finally be ours." Ifeoma smirked, curling her body against his. "Not just ours, my love. Mine. Soon, the documents will bear only my name. And then, nothing will ever take it from us." Chaik chuckled, too blinded by her beauty to hear the venom in her words. "As long as we're together, that's all that matters." But what they didn't know was this. Every laugh they shared, every vile plan they hatched, was only tightening the noose around their necks. And as they celebrated my demise, I lay hidden in the hospital, alive and listening to fate sharpening her blade. Their dance of betrayal had only just begun. The ink on my death was barely dry when Ifeoma began her next move. While Chaik drowned himself in fantasies of wealth and freedom, she was already plotting how to cut him out completely. One quiet evening in the mansion's living room, she curled up beside him, her voice smooth and persuasive. "Chaik, you've done well. Everything is yours now. But you need to be careful. People will start asking questions." He frowned, sipping his drink. "What do you mean? I'm her husband. Everything legally belongs to me." Ifeoma tilted her head, smiling faintly. "Yes, but men talk. Families fight. Cousins appear from nowhere. Don't you see? As long as everything is in your name, you're vulnerable. But if you transfer the properties into mine, no one will ever suspect. Who would question a loyal friend who stood by Adaora until the very end?" Her words slid into his ears like honey laced with poison. Chaik hesitated, pacing the room. "But won't that mean it all belongs to you?" Ifeoma kissed him softly, pressing her lips against his doubt. "It will belong to us, Chaik. Don't you trust me?" And like a fool, he did. The very next week, Chaik signed papers he believed would secure their future together. In reality, He had just handed the kingdom over to the serpent who had been coiling tighter around him all along. As I learned of their actions from the doctor's trusted informant, I smiled bitterly. Greed had finally begun to eat its own children. My silence had drawn them into the perfect snare. The day Iphioma crossed the threshold of my father's mansion, she carried herself like a bride arriving at her new home. She had packed her clothes, jewelry, perfumes, and even her silk bedsheets, moving them into my wardrobe without shame. Neighbors whispered as she strolled through the compound in flowing gowns, greeting the staff with a fake smile. The maids, bound by duty, bowed to her, though their eyes betrayed confusion. But wasn't this Madame Adaora's best friend? They murmured among themselves. Chaik watched her with pride, thinking he had finally installed his queen. She rearranged the living room, changed the curtains, and even replaced the framed photographs of my wedding with pictures of herself. It was as if she were trying to erase every trace of me, burying me deeper than the grave she thought held me. At night, she dined at my table. She slept in my bed. She even began to host guests, parading herself as the new lady of the house. "This is our home now," she declared one evening, clinking her wine glass against Chaik's. "No one can take it from us." But the walls of that mansion had memories. Every corner carried the echo of my father's love and my own resilience. Iphioma may have thought she had become the new queen, but she was only a pretender seated on a throne built on lies. And soon, the true mistress of the house would return to reclaim what was rightfully hers. It was a bright morning when I decided the time had come. After weeks of silence, of letting them wallow in their false victory, I stepped out of the hospital disguised beneath a wide-brimmed hat and dark glasses. My heart thumped with every step toward the mansion, but it wasn't fear. It was the anticipation of a storm I was about to unleash. When I reached the gates, the guards froze, their mouths falling open. "Madam?" one whispered, his face pale as if he had truly seen a ghost. I gave him a small smile. "Yes, open the gate." Inside, laughter floated from the living room. Chaik and Iphioma, basking in their stolen paradise. They were lounging on the couch, their wine glasses half full, her head resting on his shoulder. It was the image of betrayal in its purest form. I stepped inside quietly, closing the door behind me. When my heels clicked against the tiled floor, their laughter died. Chaik looked up first. His glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the floor. Iphioma's face drained of color, her lips parting in horror. "Good morning," I said calmly, my eyes fixed on them. "Did you miss me?" For a moment, silence hung heavy, broken only by their trembling breaths. They thought they had buried me. They thought I was gone forever. But there I stood, flesh and blood, alive. To them, I was no longer Adaora. I was their living ghost, and I had come to reclaim what was mine. The silence after my greeting was thick, suffocating. Chaik was the first to recover, though his face was pale and his hands shook. He stood quickly, pointing a trembling finger at me. This is impossible. You're supposed to be dead." I tilted my head, smiling coldly. "Disappointed to see me breathing?" Iphioma sprang to her feet, her robe slipping from her shoulder. "Leave this house, Adaora. You don't belong here anymore. Everything in this mansion is ours now." I laughed, a sound that sliced through the room like glass breaking. "Ours? Since when does betrayal become ownership?" Chaik's chest rose and fell with fury. "You can't threaten us, Adaora. The properties, the businesses, the accounts, all of it is in my name now. You left nothing for yourself. You're finished." I took a step closer, my eyes burning into his. "Are you sure about that?" Iphioma crossed her arms, emboldened by his words. "Yes, you fool. Chaik gave me everything too. The documents are in my care now. You have nothing. So pack your things and leave quietly before we throw you out." Their arrogance was breathtaking, their certainty almost laughable. They believed they had caged me, stolen my father's legacy, erased me. But what they didn't know was that the papers they clutched so tightly were as fake as their love. Useless, worthless lies. I could almost pity them, standing there so sure of their victory. Almost. For a few seconds, I simply stood there, watching them boast about their conquest, letting their arrogance fill the air like smoke before a fire. Then I reached into my handbag and slowly brought out a neat brown envelope. Their eyes followed my every move. Chaik swallowed hard. "What's that?" I smiled faintly, my fingers tapping the envelope. "The truth," Ifeoma scoffed, trying to mask her unease. "What truth? We already have the documents. Everything is in our names now." "Oh, you mean those documents?" I raised a brow. "The ones you've been waving around, celebrating with? The ones you thought gave you my father's empire?" I walked closer, placing the envelope on the table between us. "Those papers are fake. Every last one of them. The signatures, the seals, the transfers, all forged by design. You never owned a single plot of land, a single company share, or even this mansion you're sitting in. You've been dancing on a stage I built for you." Chaik's mouth fell open, his confidence shattering. What? That's impossible. I saw the lawyers." I cut him off with a cold laugh. "No, you saw what I wanted you to see. Did you really think a woman who inherited billions would hand it all over to a man she barely knew? Did you think I was so naive?" Ifeoma's face twisted, her voice shrill. You tricked us?" I leaned in, my voice sharp as steel. "No, you tricked yourselves. I just gave you the rope. You tied the noose." The room fell into stunned silence. For the first time, the hunters realized they had been the prey all along. The tension in the room was electric, every breath heavy with the weight of my revelation. Chaik and Ifeoma stood frozen, their faces pale, their dreams unraveling before their eyes. I let the silence linger just long enough for fear to seep into their bones. Then, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had prepared long before this day arrived. Within minutes, the blare of sirens echoed through the compound. The sound made Chaik flinch, and Ifeoma's legs buckled slightly beneath her. "What have you done, Adaora?" Chaik hissed, his voice trembling. "What I should have done the moment I saw through your lies," I replied, my tone calm, almost regal. "You plotted to kill me. You conspired to steal what was never yours. And now justice has come knocking." The front door burst open, and uniformed officers stormed in. They took one look at me, alive and standing strong, and then turned to the guilty pair. "Mr. Chaik Enin and Miss Ifeoma Okafor," the lead officer announced, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted fraud, and theft." Ifeoma tried to protest, tears streaking her face. "It's not true. She's lying." But the officers ignored her, snapping cold metal handcuffs around her wrists. Chaik struggled, shouting curses, but two policemen dragged him to his knees. I watched them being led away, their cries echoing down the halls of the mansion they once claimed as theirs. For the first time in years, I felt truly free, not just from their betrayal, but from the shadows of grief and loneliness they had tried to bury me under. Justice had finally stretched out its hand, and it had taken them both. The mansion was quiet again, emptied of the laughter of traitors and the venom of betrayal. As I walked through its halls, every step echoed with a sense of rebirth. No longer was I the naive girl who had once mistaken flattery for love or loyalty. I was Adaora Enin, daughter of Chief Enin, sole heiress, survivor, and conqueror. The newspapers screamed the story the next day. Heiress outsmarts husband and mistress in shocking betrayal. My father's name was cleared of every stain their lies had tried to cast upon it. The companies, the lands, the wealth, all restored fully to me, untouched by their greedy hands. But more than the money, it was my spirit that I reclaimed. I had looked death in the eye, tasted betrayal, and still risen stronger. Never again would I hand my heart or trust carelessly. Never again would I underestimate the darkness people could carry. Instead, I poured my energy into building schools in my father's name, hospitals for widows and orphans, and businesses that gave jobs to the poor. My wealth became a tool of light, not vanity. Every evening, as I stood on the balcony where my father once told me I was his greatest treasure, I whispered into the wind, "Papa, I made you proud. Your crown of grace lives on in me." Adaora's life had been born in tears, forged in fire, and tested in betrayal. But in the end, she emerged victorious. A queen in her own right, her legacy untouchable. She was no longer just the heiress. She was her own empire. Hey, I'm curious. Where in the world are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful African stories that will touch your heart. Thank you for watching.